They called her a danger, a threat, a mistake. She had no name, no voice anyone could understand. To most people, she was just the alien girl, the strange creature locked away in Alcatraz, the most secure prison Earth had ever built her. Skin shimmered like silver under the lights. Her eyes were too large, glowing softly like twin moons. She didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't speak. She just sat in the corner of her high-tech cell, staring at the wall, silent, still. The guards whispered about her, some afraid, others curious, but none brave enough to get too close. She had been captured 3 months ago. During a mysterious crash landing in the Nevada desert, military units surrounded her small escape pod, thinking it was a weapon. When the hatch opened and she stepped out, barefoot and blinking, they panicked and shot her with shock rounds. She didn't fight back, even as she fell unconscious now. She was a prisoner on Earth, though she had done nothing wrong. No one knew her real name, so the authorities gave her a number, Subject X91, and Alcatraz became her cage. The world watched in silence. Some believed she was a spy, others thought she was just a lost child from the stars. But no one came forward to help, and no one came to take her back. That's when Mark entered her story. He wasn't a soldier, not a scientist, not a guard. He was just a janitor, working the night shift to pay his bills. Balding, middle-aged, and quiet, Mark had seen enough broken things in life. Now he cleaned up after others. He didn't ask questions when he was assigned to Alcatraz's lower levels. His job was simple: clean the hall outside X91's cell once a night. No talking, no touching, and no eye contact. But on the very first night, he looked through the clear energy barrier and paused. She was sitting there, knees pulled to her chest, watching him, not with fear, but something else, curiosity maybe. He had expected a monster, but she looked small and almost sad. He swept the floor quickly and left, but her glowing eyes stayed with him, even after he went home. The next night, he brought a towel clean, soft and folded. The prison gave her rations, but never anything for comfort. He slid it through the small tray slot, careful not to be caught on camera. She didn't move at first, just stared at it like it was alien to her. Then slowly, she crawled forward, picked it up, and pressed it to her cheek. Mark blinked, surprised. She wasn't some violent creature. She was freezing, alone. He whispered, "You cold?" Of course, she didn't answer, but for a second, she tilted her head, as if she understood the question. From that night, he started noticing more. She wasn't just surviving, she was observing, learning. She'd watch the guards, track their movements, memorize their patterns, and sometimes, when no one was watching, she would trace something with her fingers on the wall. At first, he thought it was random, but one night he saw it clearly, a circle, then a line through it, and symbols around it. It looked like a map or a message. Mark took a photo of it on his old phone, pretending to wipe the glass. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe it was because she looked too young to be treated like a criminal. Maybe it was because no one else even tried to talk to her. Or maybe because he saw a piece of himself in her silence. Mark had once lost his daughter cancer at just 9 years old. Since then, he had stopped talking to people, stopped feeling anything. But this girl, this alien, was waking something inside him again. He didn't know her story. He didn't know where she came from. But he knew one thing for sure. She didn't belong in a prison, and somehow he could feel it. She wasn't planning to stay. Mark returned the next night. Acting normal, he pushed his cleaning cart, whistled a low tune, and kept his eyes away from the cameras. But his heart was racing. The photo he had taken of the strange symbols on the wall haunted him. He had tried to search for the meaning, but nothing came up, not from any Earth language, not from any known alien records. Still, something inside him whispered, "This is not just art." It was a message inside the cell. The alien girl sat as always, still and quiet. But when she saw Mark, her glowing eyes narrowed, not in anger, but focus. She stood up, slowly walked to the wall, and placed her hand on the exact spot where she had drawn before. But the wall was clean now. The system auto-cleaned it every 6 hours, erasing anything not approved by protocol, so she bent down and with her finger drew again, this time using the thin layer of dust that always settled at night near the floor corners. Mark's breath caught in his throat. This time the symbols were slightly different, sharper, more urgent. A circle again, but with a triangle inside it, and what looked like a falling star. Next to it, a symbol that looked like a human stick figure, except the head was marked with an X. Then 2 smaller dots orbiting the figure. Was she trying to show planets? A system, or danger? Mark dropped to one knee, pretending to tie his shoe while memorizing the shapes. He whispered, "Are you telling me something?" Zira, though Mark still didn't know that was her real name, tilted her head again. She tapped the X on the stick figure with her finger, then pointed to herself, then to the circle. Mark understood only part of it, but one word rose clearly in his mind. Trapped. She wasn't just sitting here waiting, she was warning him. He returned to his apartment that night and worked for hours, running the shapes through every translator he could find. Still no results, until by chance he remembered something strange during an old training session back when he worked in a research facility years ago. He had seen something similar in a report, the symbol of the falling star. It had shown up once in a signal from a distant system that had never been decoded. Mark found the archived report online, hidden under old layers of forgotten data. He compared the symbols. There was a match. The system was called Velatrax 9, and according to the report, Earth had received a distress signal from there. Right before the crash in Nevada, his eyes widened. She wasn't sent here, he whispered. She was crying for help, and Earth captured her. It made sense now. She was part of a rescue pod, maybe even fleeing something. Earth misunderstood. Her arrival locked her up, and now she was trying to tell someone, anyone, that time was running out. The next night, Mark returned early. Risking being seen, he brought a soft chalk he hid inside a cleaning bottle. As the cameras blinked away for a routine maintenance cycle, only 4 seconds, he slipped the chalk through the tray slot. The girl looked at it, blinked, and then drew again, this time faster. Clearer. The circle was a planet, the triangle a ship, the star a warning. She pointed to the ship symbol, then to the sky outside her tiny window. She pressed her hand to the glass and drew a symbol in the condensation that had formed 3 vertical lines crossing over each other. Then fading, Mark understood. If she didn't leave soon, others would come, and they wouldn't ask permission. This was more than just a misunderstanding. It was a silent countdown, but things were getting dangerous. A new guard had started walking the night shift, Officer Halden, known for his sharp instincts and cold behavior. He had already noticed Mark's long pauses outside X-91's cell. "Something wrong, janitor?" he asked one night, walking up behind Mark unexpectedly. Mark stood quickly, stuttering. "Just cleaning a smudge." Halden narrowed his eyes, glancing at the alien girl, who now sat still again. Emotionless. The next day, Mark was called into an administrative room. 3 officers sat across from him, asking routine questions. "Have you interacted with Subject X-91? Have you noticed unusual behavior? Are you recording anything?" He denied everything, keeping his face calm, but inside, panic bubbled. He knew he had little time, not just because of Halden, but because the girl's drawings were becoming more desperate. She had started pacing, tapping on the wall in patterns, blinking her glowing eyes like she was trying to send code. Mark made a decision that night. He copied the blueprints of the facility and began studying them in secret. The old tunnels beneath Alcatraz, the ones sealed off decades ago, still existed. And there was one route that led out into the sea, disguised as an old maintenance vent. Zero was trying to escape. She just needed help, and Mark, he had just become part of the escape plan, whether he liked it or not. Mark sat in the corner of his small apartment. The blueprint of Alcatraz spread across his table. The digital version flickered on his old tablet, showing a map of maintenance shafts, old prison tunnels, and service routes that had been forgotten. Most people didn't even know that the new high-tech Alcatraz had been built on top of the old one. But Mark had once worked construction before becoming a janitor, and he remembered things others had forgotten. One tunnel stood out. It was listed as non-operational, sealed off after a collapse decades ago. But the blueprint showed something different. The tunnel was still intact. And it led straight to the sea. If Zira, the alien girl, could get there, she could escape. But getting her out of the cell was the real challenge. And Mark couldn't do it alone. He returned to work the next night with a calm face and a pounding heart. Officer Halden was watching him more closely now, standing at the end of the hall like a silent shadow. Mark had to be careful. One wrong move and they'd both be caught. When he reached her cell, he kept his hands busy but whispered, under his breath, "Listen. There's a way out. But we need to plan it together." Zira watched him, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She didn't respond at first. Then slowly, she drew something on the floor again. This time it wasn't a warning, it was a map, a basic sketch of the hallway, the direction of the tunnel, the timing of the patrols. Mark stared at it in disbelief. She had memorized everything, even without speaking a word. She's not just watching. Mark whispered, "She's waiting." Over. The next few nights, their silent planning continued. Mark left small tools hidden inside food trays, a thin wire, a screw, a fragment of a lockpick. Zira used her long, delicate fingers to take them apart, reshape them, and hide them under the floor tiles. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, building toward the escape. One night, she tapped the glass 3 times in a slow rhythm. Mark turned his head and saw her draw a final symbol, a small hourglass. Time was running out. Mark felt the pressure too. Security was increasing, extra cameras, new protocols, and most alarming, a new kind of guard. A humanoid drone had arrived. Smooth, white, and silent, with no face, just a scanning eye. It never spoke, never blinked, and never got tired. It scanned everything, including Mark, every time he entered the corridor. Mark noticed that it spent longer scans near Zira's cell. It was as if it sensed something different, something unregistered. He had to move fast that night. Mark stayed after hours, pretending to fix a cleaning machine. In reality, he was sneaking down to the old levels, dark, dusty, and forgotten. He pushed open a metal grate using an old maintenance key he had hidden years ago. The tunnel beyond was cold and damp, the air thick with age. He walked carefully, flashlight in hand, checking the path to the sea duct. It was narrow but passable barely. A small person could crawl through it, reach the rocky edge of the shore, and disappear. Into the night, he returned just before sunrise, exhausted but hopeful. The way was clear, but the escape would have to be perfect. The next day, disaster struck. Zira's cell was suddenly upgraded. Thicker walls, stronger force fields, and new lock systems were installed. Officer Halden stood nearby, arms crossed, smiling slightly as if he knew something. "They think she's planning something," Mark whispered. "We're running out of time." That night, when Mark approached the cell, Zira didn't move. She looked defeated, her glowing eyes dimmer than before. Mark dropped to one knee near the glass, hiding from the camera angle. "Don't give up," he whispered. "We're so close." She looked at him slowly, then raised her hand and tapped the glass once. Mark took that as a yes. He returned to the maintenance room and activated a system glitch, an old trick from his repair days. It caused a short blackout in the camera feed for exactly 6 seconds at 3 a.m., just enough for Zira to make her first move. They planned the escape for 3 nights later, during a scheduled system reboot and guard shift change, one of the few moments when Alcatraz would be slightly weaker. But Mark knew something else. Officer Halden was getting too close. He had noticed the slight changes in schedule, the extra cleaning time, the missing tools. If Halden found out, it wouldn't just be Mark who paid the price. Zira would be moved, or worse, disappeared, and the world would never know the truth. As Mark lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he realized something. This wasn't just about helping someone escape. This was about justice, about truth, Zira wasn't. Just a prisoner, she was a warning, and if Earth didn't listen, her people might come. And they wouldn't be as patient as she was. Asterisk. The clock had started ticking. Mark knew it, and so did Zira. 3 nights left, that's all they had, and every hour that passed brought more risk. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison anymore, it had become a fortress. Armed drones buzzed through the corridors at random times. The humanoid scanner now patrolled with sharper movements, and Officer Halden. He had started showing up even during night hours, pretending to inspect doors and systems. Mark felt the pressure building. He kept his movements calm, his eyes low, and his smile fake. But deep down, he was holding a secret so big it could cost him his life. Every night, during his cleaning shift, he passed Zira's cell. She no longer sat silently. Now she stood near the wall, always ready to pass or receive hidden signals. Mark would nod once if things were still safe, twice if something had changed. Tonight, it was 2 nods. He leaned his mop against the wall and whispered, "New cameras on the east wing." Zira blinked twice, signaling she understood. She tapped the floor softly with her foot in a rhythm that Mark had learned meant, "Continue plan." He nodded and moved on, pretending to clean the corner, but inside, fear was growing. Mark had never done anything criminal in his life. He paid his taxes, followed rules, and lived quietly. But helping this alien girl escape, that was a line he had never imagined crossing, and yet, it felt right. Zira wasn't the danger, Earth was the danger to her. Locked, studied, ignored, and treated like a threat just because she was different. Mark couldn't be part of that anymore. That night, he returned to the maintenance room and opened the old storage locker. Inside was a small device he had built over the last week. It looked like a normal cleaning tool, but inside it had a signal disruptor powerful enough to knock out 1 security node for a full minute. It would only work once, and they had to use it at the exact right moment. He named it the key, because that's what it was, Zira's key to freedom. Meanwhile, Zira was doing her part. She wasn't just smart, she was brilliant. Each night, she pretended to sleep while her fingers worked quietly, rewiring part of her bed frame into a conductor, using the scrap tools Mark had given her. She created a pulse emitter hidden beneath the metal flooring. It would create a short energy loop enough to force the door sensors into reboot mode. Combined with Mark's signal disruptor, it could open her cell for 20 seconds. That's all they'd have, 20 seconds to slip past the first checkpoint and into the old tunnel door. But things were getting tight. The warden had announced a surprise inspection the day before the escape. Extra guards would be stationed around the lower levels, and worse, Halden was now checking employee lockers. One by one, Mark knew he was being watched. He moved the key to a different hiding place each shift. If Halden found it, everything would be over. The night before the escape, Zira drew one final map in the dust. It showed her cell, the hallway, the tunnel, and then the sea. She looked at Mark and touched her chest with her hand, her way of saying, "Thank you." Mark didn't respond, afraid his voice might shake. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat on his couch, hands gripping a cup of cold coffee. His mind raced with 1,000 questions. What if they fail? What if Zira gets caught? What if she dies? But then he thought about her eyes, the way they softened when he left her that towel. The way she never begged, never cried, only waited. She trusted him, and that trust was now his burden to carry. The day arrived. Mark wore his uniform, kept his head down, and walked the halls like it was just another shift. But inside his chest, his heart beat like a drum. He reached the corridor outside Zira's cell right on time. She was already standing, her hand against the wall, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Mark reached into his tool belt and pressed a small button. The signal disruptor activated. Silently, cameras flickered and went dark. Zira hit her emitter at the same time. Her cell door hissed, glitched, and slid open. For the first time in months, she stepped out, barefoot, silent and determined. Mark didn't wait. He turned and led the way, moving fast but careful. They passed the first security hall while the sensors were rebooting. The old maintenance door was ahead, half rusted and forgotten. Mark pulled the panel off the wall, using a small override chip he had hidden weeks ago. The door creaked open, revealing the tunnel. Zira looked back once toward the place she had been caged in for so long. Then she stepped into the shadows. Disappearing into the tunnel's darkness, Mark followed, sealing the door behind him. Alcatraz didn't know it yet, but history had just been rewritten. The tunnel was cold and narrow. Mark and Zira moved quietly, their footsteps soft against the damp floor. Every sound echoed like a warning, but they didn't stop, not even once. Zira had never seen freedom before. For months, her world had been four walls, bright lights and silent pain. Now, with every step into the dark tunnel, she felt closer to home. But she also knew freedom wouldn't come without a price. Mark led the way, his flashlight barely working. The air was thick and water dripped. From cracks above, he glanced back at her. She looked calm, focused, but then she paused, her head turning suddenly, as if hearing something. "What is it?" Mark whispered. She raised two fingers and pointed back, toward the door they had come through. Someone had found the breach. Sirens didn't scream yet, but she could feel it. Her kind had sharp instincts, trained to hear the slightest shift. In energy, Mark cursed under his breath. They had less time than he thought. They had to reach the outer sea duct now. They moved faster, but halfway through the tunnel, a red light flashed above them. A loud alarm echoed through the halls of Alcatraz, shaking the old tunnel walls. Lockdown activated. All gates sealed, all guards armed. Back in the prison, Officer Halden stood in front of Zira's open cell. His eyes narrowed, hands clenched behind his back. "Of course it was him," he muttered. Mark's pattern of behavior, the strange tool movements, the camera glitches, it all added up. He turned to the command room and ordered, "Shut down every escape route. I want full visual feed across every corridor." Now, the warden barked orders too, but it was Halden who took control. They scanned the facility's heat signatures, searching every inch. Then, one signal pinned deep under the prison. "Inactive maintenance tunnel," one tech said. "No cameras down there, but movement detected." Halden's lips curled into a cold smile. "Seal the sea duct. Send in drones." Meanwhile, Mark and Zira reached the final gate. A large rusted door stood between them and the exit. Mark knelt beside the control box, pulling out wires and twisting fuses. "Hurry," Zira whispered, not in words, but with her eyes. She could feel the energy above them shifting. The humans were closing in. Mark sparked the final wire, and the panel blinked green. The door creaked open just a few inches, but it was enough. They squeezed through, emerging into a small rocky cavern that opened to the sea. Fresh, salty air hit their faces. Zira paused, staring at the moonlight reflecting off the water. It was beautiful. But the moment didn't last. A sharp buzzing sound hit their eardrums. Flying fast, scanning the coast, Mark looked at her, panic rising. "Swim, now," he said, pulling off his boots. But Zira didn't move. She looked up and froze. Above them, a silhouette stood on the cliff. Officer Halden. He held a weapon in one hand and a tracker in the other. "I knew it," Halden called out, voice echoing over the waves. "You really thought you could outsmart me?" Mark stepped in front of Zira, hands up. "Don't do this," he said. "She's not dangerous." Halden didn't care. "All aliens are dangerous," he replied coldly. "She fooled you." "But not me." Zira looked at Mark, then stepped forward. She raised her hands slowly and touched her chest. A soft glow formed between her palms. Light. Not a weapon. It floated up gently, forming a shape in the air, an image of her planet. Burning, ships falling, children crying, and her running toward a pod. It was a memory projected into the open air. Mark stared, speechless. Even Halden paused for a moment. Zira wasn't a threat, she was a refugee. But Halden's pride was stronger than truth. He raised his weapon again. Zira stepped in front of Mark, shielding him with her body. But before Halden could fire, a loud mechanical voice echoed. Unauthorized lethal force detected. Stand down. The humanoid drone had followed, watching everything from above. It moved forward, scanning. Halden's weapon, then. It did something no one expected. It turned toward Zira, scanned her glow, and said, "Subject X-91. Verified as non-hostile. Memory confirmed." Requesting diplomatic review, Halden froze. Zira's recording had been enough. The drone had recognized her innocence. Mark grabbed Zira's hand and pulled her toward the water. She looked back once. Eyes meeting Halden's, no hate, just sadness. They dove into the sea as the drone flew up, blocking Halden's shot. The water was cold, rough, but it carried them away from the island. Back in the command center, alarm shifted from red to blue. Subject X-91 status changed. Diplomatic entity. Do not engage. The world had changed in that moment, and Earth had no idea what was coming next. Asterisk. The sea roared around them. Dark waves crashed against sharp rocks as Mark and Zira swam away from the prison that had nearly swallowed them forever. Salt burned Mark's eyes, and the cold made his muscles stiff. But he didn't stop, not for a second. Zira swam beside him, faster and more fluid, her body glowing faintly under the surface. It wasn't just light, it was a signal. She was calling out, not in words, but in energy. They reached a hidden shore far from the prison lights. Mark pulled himself onto the sand. Coughing, shaking, half frozen, Zira came next, kneeling beside him. She placed her hand on his chest, and her glow pulsed once. Warmth spread through his skin, calming his shivers. He looked at her, weak but smiling. "You saved me," he whispered. But they weren't safe yet. Above them, high in the sky, Earth drones circled, scanning the area. Their time was short, Zira. Look toward the horizon, toward the stars. She closed her eyes and placed her hand to the ground. Mark watched, confused. "What are you doing?" he asked. Then he saw it. The sand around her hand began to shift, glowing softly. It wasn't magic, it was communication. She was sending a final signal. A call to someone or something that had been waiting. Back in Alcatraz, panic had taken over. The command center was in chaos. "Subject X-91 is gone," one guard shouted. "The humanoid drone overrode our orders," yelled another. Officer Halden stood in silence, staring at the frozen screen. His face was pale. For the first time, he didn't know what to do. Zira had shown her truth to the world, and the machines had believed her. Now the humans were being watched, not just by their own people, but by her people. Mark and Zira climbed through thick forest, heading toward a cliff where he had hidden an old escape pod from his salvage days. It wasn't perfect. It barely ran, but it was enough to disappear. But halfway there, Zira stopped. Her eyes widened, and she looked up. The sky was changing, dark clouds parting, as if something massive was coming. Then the ground rumbled. Mark turned, confused. "What is it? Is it a drone?" Zira didn't answer. She simply smiled and pointed upward. Above them, the clouds split. A ship appeared, unlike anything Mark had ever seen. It was smooth, silver, shaped like a tear, and completely silent. No engines, no fire, just floating like a dream above the earth. A light beam shot down, surrounding both of them. Mark felt his body lift weightless, warm and safe. Zira reached out and took his hand. Together, they rose into the ship, leaving the world behind. Inside, Mark blinked at the strange beauty around him. The ship wasn't metal, it was alive. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, walls glowing softly with energy. Zira led him through a corridor without speaking. Aliens like her stood on either side, watching silently. They didn't look angry, just cautious. Mark stood tall, holding his hands up in peace. Zira stepped forward and touched a panel. A projection appeared in the air, showing Earth, then Alcatraz, then her prison cell, then it showed Mark, helping her, feeding her, risking everything for her. Her people watched the memory without a word. Then one elder stepped forward. He placed his hand on Mark's shoulder and nodded. "You are the first to see," he said in perfect English, you saw her as more than a prisoner. Mark was speechless. Zira turned to him and finally spoke in his language. Her voice was soft, musical. Now they know, she said, and because of you. There won't be war. Mark's eyes widened. War? He repeated. Zira nodded. My people thought Earth had killed me. They were ready to strike. Mark swallowed hard. But now? He asked. She smiled. They saw what you did. One human changed everything. The ship turned, rising above the atmosphere. Below, Earth authorities tracked it, but couldn't touch it. Every missile, every drone, every system locked. And failed. Back on Earth, the news exploded. Alien. Ship leaves Earth with escaped prisoner and human inside. Alcatraz breached by a girl. No one understood. Was Earth about to start an interstellar war? People demanded answers, but none came. The world was left speechless. Inside the ship, Mark stood beside Zira as stars rushed past the window. He had no idea where they were going. He only knew one thing. He had helped someone who needed it, and somehow that simple act had saved two worlds. The stars stretched out like a blanket of fireflies. Mark stood at the edge of the alien ship's observation window. He had never seen space like this, so quiet, so endless, so beautiful, and yet, inside his heart, there was still a storm. He had escaped Alcatraz, broken every rule, and helped an alien prisoner flee Earth. He didn't know what would happen next. Would Earth call him a criminal? A traitor? Or would they finally understand what they had done wrong? Zira stood beside him, her silver skin glowing softly under the ship's inner light. She didn't say much, but her eyes held peace. She placed a small device in Mark's hand, a thin, smooth disc that hummed quietly. What is it? Mark asked. A translator, she said gently. It will help you speak to my people. He smiled. Finally, we can talk. Zira nodded. And there is much to say. The alien ship stopped near a massive station floating above a blue and purple gas giant. It was not a war base. It looked more like a sanctuary, a temple in the stars. Dozens of species moved through the hallways, none of them in chains. It was clear, this place was about unity, not fear. Zira brought Mark before the High Council, tall figures dressed in flowing robes. Faces calm but unreadable. He stood straight. Nervous, unsure if they'd believe him. But then Zira spoke for him, not with words, but by sharing memories. A beam of light played between them, images flashed. Mark giving her food, hiding tools, risking himself, protecting her. The council watched without blinking, and when the vision ended, the room fell silent. Then one of them stepped forward. Your species locked her like an animal, he said. Yet you chose kindness. Mark swallowed. I didn't know what else to do. She wasn't a monster. No, the elder agreed. But many feared she was. They looked at Zira, then back at Mark. You have done more than rescue a friend, the elder said. You stopped a war. Mark blinked. There really was going to be war? Zira nodded. My people thought Earth had kidnapped me for experiments, like others before. Mark felt cold. What happens now? He asked. The council turned to him. That depends on your world, they said. If they wish peace, they must speak it, not just in words, but in actions. Mark looked at Zira. Will you go back? He asked. She smiled. Someday, yes, but not as a prisoner. As a voice. Back on Earth, silence filled every major news network. The footage of Zira's escape had gone viral. Leaked images from the prison showed her cell, her drawings, her silence. Some people raged. How did she escape? But most were shocked by the truth. She had never harmed anyone. And then the real video was released, the memory recording, played for all of Earth to see. It showed Mark's kindness, her fear, and her desperate message. People sat in their homes, watching in silence. Even the harshest critics had no words. The government held a press conference. A spokesperson came forward with trembling hands. We misunderstood, he admitted. We saw her as a danger, and we were wrong. The United Earth Council sent out a signal, an official message of apology. It traveled through space, reaching the station where Mark now stood. The High Council received it, read it, and remained silent. They didn't reject it, but they didn't reply either, not yet. Mark stood on the platform outside the alien sanctuary, looking down at Earth from afar. It was small now, just a ball of clouds and oceans, but it was his home, Zira stepped beside him. "You changed things," she said, "more than you know." "I just did what felt right," Mark replied. "You didn't deserve to be locked away." Zira turned to him, her voice soft. "Many of your kind still fear what they don't understand." "I know," Mark said, "but maybe now they'll start to listen." She held out a small device, a communicator linked to Earth. "Whenever you're ready, you can speak to them," she said. Mark took it, breathed in, and nodded. "I'll try," he said, "not just for you, for all of us." And as he looked out into the stars, he realized something. He hadn't just helped an alien escape. He had helped the galaxy see a side of humanity it had never seen before: compassion. And now the world watched in silence, waiting, wondering what came next.